Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Mages, Sages, Mystics, and Seers, I am proud to present Joanne Gajewski and Joyful Empowerment. Greetings and welcome, Joanne. We lost your sound.
Hello.
There we go.
My dog is speaking for us tonight. The technical difficulties are continuing for me, apparently. But yes.
I'm still looking forward to your show. I'll be here. If you need me, just holler.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Joyful Empowerment. Tonight, I have an amazing guest who has been on before. Her name is Amanda Keith, and she is a mambo. She is a doula that specializes in the death process. She's a good friend, and she does so many amazing things. And her and I have both gone through a similar yet different experience lately, dealing with loss. Hers is a lot more recent. And we talked and decided that there's not enough talk out in the community at large about grief and the death process. So tonight we're going to be highlighting that process. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest, Amanda Keith. And Amanda, tell everybody about yourself in case they don't happen to know who you are.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And I am a mambo, Sapuen in Haitian Voodoo. I'm a healer. I'm a root worker, which I'm a death doula. I'm a certified death doula. I help those cross on the other side. I'm an herbalist. There's a lot of things that I do. And I'm also co-owner of Three Crows Conjure. So yeah, here in Indianapolis and online. So yeah.
I know you do so many things, and congratulations on Three Crows Conjure coming back to life after it went through a period of uncertainty there for a while. That's another thing that you and TJ have really worked hard on. And you really have some wonderful products there. If nobody has checked out Three Crows Conjure, please do. They're very accommodating. They have a great variety. And they do a lot of other things other than just, sell books and gifts. They offer many services. I know you have a St. Michael's service coming up, which people can participate in, and you do a lot of other classes as well.
Yes.
So you do a lot for the community at large as far as teaching and everything. Now I know recently you lost your dad. I did during COVID. So we've gone through kind of a similar yet different experience as far as that process. And I know for me, a lot of it was you got to spend a lot of that time with your dad when he was in that stage of life, which I was not able to do. And I find that was kind of difficult. So how do you think being part of the process helped more than, say, being on the outside looking in? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't able to be with him.
No.
And how did that affect your grief process?
Well, in some ways, I guess I could say I was prepared, but you're never really prepared. Like, you may see it coming, you may notice the signs, you may, have the process. I'm grateful for the time that I had because I was able to help him, walk him through his journey, also fight with him. I mean, there was a lot of stubbornness in his part. He is a Marine. He was a Marine. So, his mindset was like, I'm going to try to get through this. I'm going to heal. I'm going to, and he the hardest part through the whole process, I think both are difficult. Okay. Death in general and transition, both, it's a process for both. I usually say both people that are going through it, the caretaker and the person dying. It is the best way to put it, both are going through a dying and rebirth. They're just in different senses. Okay. So both is a difficult journey because you're having a lot of emotions through the whole processes and stages. And some days it's better, some days it's not. I can't imagine not being able to be with him, but I've been in that situation with a loved one where I couldn't be with them. Actually, my dad's mother, I couldn't be with her. She had cancer and she ended up passing away in her sleep, but she had struggled a lot um, with the cancer, and she was on experimental drugs and everything like that. So it was a different process. But psychically, we had connected and we were always extremely close. And I remember talking to her, and we actually had a conversation at the age of 17. I was 17 and she was in her 70s. And I remember I was like, Grandma, do you believe that two people can be connected and they understand, one another? And I know that when you're sick, I know when something's wrong. I know these things. And she knew. She knew. I knew the day that she passed. I knew the time. I looked up at the clock and I was like, today is an important day. I don't know why, but I knew. So I think being present and then not being present, it's two totally different experiences. Both are difficult in different ways. And I think that's where you have to honor. You can't compare the two. Um, but being hands-on with my father, it was hard because like one thing with my dad, I'm incredibly proud of him. He was completely coherent. Like his mind was intact until the hour he passed. Okay. So he was on life support, he was on dialysis, he was on heart suppressors to keep his blood pressure up. But everything else, his body was just failing. His mind was clear. Um, and we had deep conversations. Like he would tell me, maybe we'll talk about this later, but he was seeing things and he was seeing, and the night before he passed, um, he was holding on to go and have his pinning ceremony. The VA does like a pinning ceremony to honor the vet before they die, if they know that he's getting ready to pass. But it was very challenging because, with the medical process and the way that society it's set up, the hospitals aren't set up to really experience grief. Like they're getting better and death. They're there to fix things, to cure things, or to extend things. Well, they had extended it, and to the extent, like my dad, I know he wanted to be with me for my 40th birthday. Literally, I spent my 40th birthday in the hospital with him, knowing this was probably going to be my last birthday with him. And he died on August 8th, my birth 10 days later. So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yes, it answered my question and more, because, like I said, during the pandemic, it was different. And my dad had his faculties as well. And like you said, it's almost like they postponed things,
Mhm.
and like he waited through the whole, like we found out probably in like September. He made the choice himself. And I remember getting so mad, like, why are you giving up, Dad? Why are you giving up? And he's like, he's like, I'd rather just, he's like, this isn't worth living my life this way. You know what I mean? They make that active decision, which I thought was so amazing, because to have that clarity of mind, I don't know if I could do that. But then again, you don't know till you're in that position, I guess.
Exactly.
Um, they have that strength. And he, like I said, we found out right about September, Octoberish, going into the holidays, and they
Mhm.
had just put the quarantines down. So I wasn't able to go and spend time with them because Massachusetts was closed, whatever. And when I went, I wanted to go, and when I wanted to go, I couldn't go. And then I got COVID. I mean, it was just it haunts me because I didn't get to have those precious moments with him that I wanted. But he did, like, I feel like almost like you said, postpone the time until after the holidays because he passed right in January of 2021.
Yeah. I've noticed with the few deaths that I have already started that process I'm working is if they know that an important day is coming and that it's going to affect their loved one, they usually do postpone it and try to will it out. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, with my dad, it was completely different. Like my dad, he retired in February. My
Yeah.
dad was only 61, so he was young. And but he had suffered. He was an alcoholic and he had suffered from alcoholism. And by the time he moved in, he started falling and we didn't know what was causing the falls. And he was living by himself and he was already having back pain. Like I was having to take him to chiropractors. Like this had been going on since after my stepmother passed in 2021. So his health started gradually declining. And then it was just like April, he moved in with me for during the solar eclipse. And then he was like, no, 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 I can do this. And I was like, okay. So he moved back into his little place and he fell. I moved him back into my house. That was the plan. May 20th, which ironically was the day my grandfather had passed, my papal, my mom's dad. And again, from there, that day on the 20th, I got his insurance approved through the VA because he had no insurance at the time. And then that night, I had to take him into the hospital and he stayed for 8 days. And I thought I was going to lose him then.
Yeah.
He was in ICU, step down. And then he got moved up and then he came home. Didn't know this. They almost put him in hospice until right before he went back in. And I was like, why didn't you guys put him on hospice? And they were like, well, we were hoping, because of his age, they were hoping that maybe he could bounce back. And he looked like he was. But that's the funny thing. Our bodies are like, when it's our time, it happens. And it happens sometimes. Even though there are signs, if you pay attention, and even he knew, there are signs where, you have to, be aware of if you're not, if you're not doing this kind of work, most people don't see the signs. Like they kind of go, well, maybe. But you have to understand, I work with death. Like even as a mambo, I remember my godfather going, oh, the good they love you. And I'm like, I've always had that gift of being a medium. So
Yeah.
for me, being a death worker, it's I don't want to say, well, yeah, death worker. I mean, I communicate. I'm a medium. I work with the dead and with the ancestors and working, in this field. It's a lot. But the thing is I will also tell you, with working with the dead and the deceased, you learn to appreciate life a little bit more.
Yeah. My whole life changed from that point on so many levels. And I don't know, like, because we all hear the word death doula and we wonder what that is. Now, do you help the families with these like kind of feelings that happen after the fact? Is it like when you're doing that death doula process, you're there for the person, obviously, but what about the family? Like how does it benefit them to have somebody like you? Because I think for me, it would have helped me tremendously had I had somebody like you there to bridge that gap, especially the gap of distance at the time.
No, I completely agree. So I am there for the client and then their family, especially afterwards. Like I have another client here locally. I adore her. She was actually she would come to me for sessions and helps and before she got sick. And she was like, "You're a death doula. I need your help. Like, I don't want to trust anybody else." So it was my job to make sure that, okay, does she have her POA? Does she have her last will and testament? Does she have all of the paperwork? And then I'm there to just kind of be her support. And then as she needs me from time to time, and I'm never too far away from her. And and I know her daughter. And so, I check in with her daughter and see how her daughter's doing. And, you know, it is a process and more hands-on. And so with this client, um, you know, and this does happen because the end of life, when our body shuts down, people are not prepared, okay, for the body.
Yeah.
Because I have noticed with the deaths that I've been through, that once the soul leaves the body, you've got about a half hour to 45, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour after the soul leaves, that the body usually goes. And that's just been with the experiences that I've been with the 3 deaths that I have on my plate. And it's just been observing, nothing like, oh yeah, this is exactly how it happens. This just so happens to be my experience with it. So my dad's was a little bit different because with my papal and my mammal that I helped, they didn't have expelling. But my dad's situation, because he had kidney failure and liver failure in his lungs, and like he had expelling. Like each person's gonna be different. Each experience is gonna be different. And when I tell people, not everybody wants to see that. Not everybody. So I will say the fact that you weren't able to be with him when he passed, that's probably a blessing because you always have the good memories and remember him how he was. Okay. Now, when I say I went through every process with my dad, I did. I watched his cremation. Okay. You can watch cremation. And I think that's another thing is you learn how to help the families go, okay, do you want to be buried? Do you want natural birth or natural burial? In a sense, you're going back um, because death is a birth. It's them going into the spirit realm. And then, um, for the family, they're a totally different person afterwards because it's like that person that you were, you now have this huge missing gap of this loved one that's passed. And it's like your world stands still and then everything else is back to normal. Like, and there's so many emotions during that. And um you get angry, you get frustrated, and not many people are blessed to be able to stop and have bereavement time. Like normally we're having to go back to work, we're having to go back to, we're planning funerals right away. That was an odd thing with my dad, you know, taking that step was there was a delay. Like they put the wrong doctor on his death certificate. So that before the death certificate could be signed, they had to correct it here. So that took almost 2 weeks. So, and then I finally got him cremated. And then I had family coming out of town So I had to extend the service until, like, literally it was this past Sunday. I had a service. So we've just now completed everything. And now I can focus on me. So it's a process. So when I help families, yeah, it's a process. And it's not just like, okay, bye, your loved one's gone. I'm sorry. No, it's sitting down with them, understanding, helping them understand what they're feeling. And on top of that, I do highly recommend Courtney Weber, her book, Sacred Tears. Highly recommend her book for pagans and witches. So um, it's been tremendous help for me, but also I'm like, okay, you know,
Yeah, it's there's really no words because on a different on a mental health level, you're trained to, look at death in stages. And I think that creates a misconception out in the real world that, you go through these steps, 1 2 3, the 5 stages of grief, whatever it is, and then you're better. And I think that creates a huge misconception in the grief process, because the biggest question I get just as a mental health professional is, I can't seem to get over this. And the message I think that needs to come across is, like you said, it's different for everybody in the experience, for one,
mhm,
and how you're experiencing it. You're going to experience what if it's a traumatic death, all these different factors play in. But what we don't discuss is, okay, so after all that is done, there you are at that level. And at what point is an adequate, people are like, well, I should be over this by now. When do I, and I know I used to say that. I'm like, when does it stop hurting? Like, when do I, and I'm sure you are feeling somewhat that way yourself, especially now because you just had the ceremony. So now, here's a little bit more, you know what I mean? It's extended. And my answer to people is, and I don't know if you feel the same way or if you tell your clients, that there is no right way to grieve, really. It's
yeah,
unique. And with all the psychological schooling I've had and magical experience or whatever, the one thing I learned was it's unique for everybody. There's no time limit, and there's no right or wrong way to do it.
exactly.
You're not going to go through it in stages like bullet points. It's off. Some days you're good, some days you're bad. Like some days it's been like what, 2021, it's been 3 years now, and I still hurt, you
Yeah.
know? So how does that death doula process help that more, do you think? Or
You know, when I was going through this, there's, I was, I started Courtney's book towards the end of my dad's life, which I'm grateful that it came out when it did. But Courtney kind of explains it and nailed it on the head. It's like a spiral.
yeah,
Okay? Grief is like a spiral. So sometimes, that's why some days you're great, some days you're feeling better. You're always still, I guess the best way I could describe it is like there's just an emptiness that there's when that person passes, there's an emptiness that's just um a void, you know? And sure, it does get easier. And sure, yeah, you start remembering the good memories and you start remembering, everything. Because if you were to ask me, I mentioned my father had struggled with alcoholism. Well, when he moved in with me, he gave up everything. He gave up his smokes, he gave up his alcohol. But at the same time, I don't see my dad. Like we had such a healing period during that time. It wasn't always easy, I will tell you. It was no bed of roses, but we worked things out. And I think that with that grieving, that helped with my grieving, knowing that what I had and where me and my father were at that time. So what I do know is that there does get a point where you stop mourning. Okay. The grieving never really stops, but the mourning does come to a cease. It for the most part. Like you're not as like it doesn't hit you as like a punch. Does that make sense?
I honestly wish we had, my family had had somebody like you in the process, because I think because of when it happened, and everything took longer to do because it was the pandemic, and and you could only do certain things, and and this was kind of, it was expected but unexpected. My father was older, but it was unexpected. And it, to me, having somebody like you probably would have tied that process a lot better, because I know for myself, I felt a lot of guilt for not being able to be there. And I still do. And I still wonder. It's one of those things I always ask, Dad, I'm sorry. Do you know how much I love you? You
And he
know?
does. He does. That's the thing is like you have to know you did everything that you possibly could with the circumstances at hand. And I think that's where when you're dealing with this and dealing with grief, that you have to look at going, I did my best. Because it's an intense process. I mean, it's no different than labor. It's no different. And people kind of look at me a little weird when I was like, birth and death are the same, like labor and death, like the process is the same. You're just having the different, like one going into the world and one coming in, and the other one's coming out. And the thing is it's still a process. Some is quick. Death is really unexpected. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you're doing comfort care, the palliative care teams that hospitals, at least here in Indiana, they're doing great. They're being phenomenal about it. But, there's still, you know, there's still gaps because death is such an uncomfortable unknown because death is unknown. We don't know what's on the other side fully, you know. But I think with it is you have to know that your emotions are okay. Like the anger, like you feel the whole gambit when somebody's dying. Like, you're like, you feel anger, you feel upset, you feel shame, you feel guilt, and you've gotta catch the guilt and the shame, because otherwise it eats you up. It
Yeah.
really so
Now, one other question.
Mhm,
Now, how long in the process are you there? Because I know, like, after the person is gone, and you have people around, you have a lot of support in those initial stages, and then all of a sudden, once that stops, there you are.
mhm.
Are you a part of that process? Are you there for the people in that stage as well? Or like, are you there for them after? How long after the process are you there?
I usually like, professionally, I usually do, um, like 6 weeks,
Okay.
normally. It's kinda like postpartum.
Yeah.
Think of it like as a doula, as a postpartum. Um, you the first 6 weeks. But I never stop talking to the families, like, it's never even like, that's not the deal, like,
Yeah.
you now somebody that I know they probably need help. "Hey, if you need to reach out, please reach out,"
Yeah.
There's always that extended now, I'm not gonna be sitting there as, like it's kinda like a mother bear, you sit there,
Yeah.
you know, you're there for a
No, you're
little.
not there 24/7, but I know, like, for a lot of people, once that initial week of the funeral and all that is over, and then you're stuck alone with your thoughts,
Mhm,
you know, who do you have to go ask these questions? And do you still offer that support for them?
absolutely.
Like if they call you and go, Amanda, I'm still feeling angry, and
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's when I go, okay, well, what are because a lot of times, like, especially dealing with parents and stuff, you don't see the parent as the human as they were. You know, That's why I said me and my father had a lot of understanding, and I got to see the human that he was. I saw his flaws, I saw his fears, I saw everything.
Yeah.
It was not comfortable for him because, he never wanted me really to see that, and he had a lot of shame, but I had to give him peace, and
Yeah.
that was my job, was to give him peace.
And
So
that's hard too, because they come from a generation not like ours, where we, encourage sharing your emotion. They come from a time when especially as a male,
Mhm.
and we often forget this nowadays, that they were taught not to, you had to be tough. You couldn't show emotion. It was weakness.
Yeah. That was the hardest part. I will share this because I think a lot of people can learn from my dad. I know I did. And my dad worked hard at Pepsi. Like that, like he was a Pepsi serviceman after for 35 years. That was his world. And my dad was so smart, like he should have really been an engineer. I don't know why he wasn't, but like loved to figure things out and work with his hands. And my dad worked hard, 60, sometimes 80 hours a week, just to provide for his family. At the end of it, like I said, he retired in February. He didn't get to enjoy his retirement. He didn't, and he was only 61 years old.
Yeah.
So I had to help him at the best I could. Tell him, Dad, you lived your life the best that you knew how. And yeah, and I mean, watching my dad go, this is kind of a kick in the butt because, he doesn't get to, go fishing with my sons. He doesn't get to, have more Christmases with us. He doesn't get to, enjoy his retirement. My dad was an artist. He did model railroading, which is an art, you
Yeah.
know, and he used to build small scale railroads.
That's
And
so cool. My
I,
dad would have loved them. He loved those kind of things.
we never got to go on our train ride together. Like these are things that I now get to do with my kids, but I had to watch him in the hospital have so much regret because he didn't take the time to enjoy life. So I took that as, okay, we need to enjoy more. We
Yeah.
need to work, put in our work, but to enjoy life because
Yeah.
otherwise, um, you can't. You
It's
get
interesting because I'm sorry, I'm crying too.
no.
Um, it teaches you what really matters. Like so many lessons I learned, and you know me really well, and a lot of the changes I've made since it happened.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you know what I mean because you're going through it right now. It
Absolutely.
changes how you see people, how you see what really matters in life, what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you have to go, you have to see people for people and you have to move, you know, I'm not saying to allow the toxic people constantly in your life, but at the same time, you have to understand that, they're humans and to have a little bit more compassion and to have a little more compassion for yourself and to understand. And, I've had to help my children understand what they're feeling because they don't know. I mean, my kids are
Yeah.
10 and 11. So here I am having to get them to go, yeah, this is what you're feeling. You're sad, aren't you? Yeah, I miss him. Even though, and they would say it, oh, he drove us crazy sometimes. And I was like, you know what? You drove him crazy sometimes. So it's okay. That's part of the human experience.
Children have such a beautiful way of simplifying something and just making us appreciate the moment. And I
Mhm.
and I know that's one of the biggest I learned about a lot about people, like people I thought should be there that weren't.
Oh, yeah.
and people that I never imagined, like you and TJ and others that were there for me to help me through. And I learned, the joy in the kids, because two, my nephews at the time, they were so strong during that service. I was so impressed about, because they're young adults at the time. I think one was 20, the other was in their teens, and they were just amazing. And I noticed the amazing, like, you just notice more. I can't explain it. I don't know if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. There's not a day I don't, you know, look at things differently because, I just don't have that time. And I've done that because I've lost my grandparents. My grandparents were like my parents, my mom's mom and dad. And to be there for, I moved back. I was living out of state. I moved back to be with them.
Yeah.
For me, now I'm like, okay, and it's allowing myself the grace to slow down and to just, I'm not moving as much as, I'm really looking at what is important and what is not important in my life and trying not to, you know, overload my schedule, you know,
Yeah.
because
Savor the moments. That's my big thing. Savoring moments, like, be present in the moments. And I can't stress that enough, especially when you look at the world today. And everything is chaos. Everything, people are so negative and so hard on each other. And I've cut back on my social media time. I know you have, as far as where we're going, because our outer world is a reflection of who we are inside. And if you're in part of us is we go by what's around us, right? Our environment. And if you are feeling toxic or putting toxicity in you, it's going to manifest in your outer world, and that's not the way it should be. And we really need to get back to the perspective. And I think we don't talk enough about this process because it's very emotional. Obviously, look at us,
yeah, yeah,
and I think there need to be more death doulas, and it needs to be a bigger, because I think that would help the process so much. It will help the person, the family members especially, be more present in that moment for their loved one. And I can't imagine how you had to do both. You're a very strong. I don't know if I could have held it together personally.
there were days that I could, like, it took every strength. I mean, this is the thing is, and not everybody, like, I know this is part of my calling because of how I can separate. And for the longest time, I was emotionally, like, disconnected. Like,
Yeah.
when I was there present with him and holding his hand, and there would be times where, yeah, I would break down. And he'd look at me going, "Oh, don't cry." And, I'm like, "Don't tell me not to cry." Like, that was our conversation. It's like, and he's like, "You're gonna make me cry." I'm like, "Then cry." It's like, "I'm gonna get you." And I did. Like, I have never seen my dad until I got older cry. It just wasn't something that my dad ever did. There was one other time, and that's when my grandmother passed.
Yeah.
Like, I just never, like, it was that strong Marine. You gotta be strong. You gotta be
Yeah.
a man. And it's like, no, and this is helping me teach my son, my two boys, it's okay to share your emotions,
Yeah.
what you're feeling, and it's okay, you know?
I had it just funny because I just had that same conversation with a friend of mine today, that as people, especially in Western society, we're taught that crying is a sign of weakness.
Mhm.
Because one of my clients was like, "I cried today and I grabbed my son and I just cried. I was just so emotional." And I was like, that's actually good. Crying is a cathartic release of emotion. And If you don't let it out, it's got to go somewhere. So if you don't release it through crying, it's going to come out in a behavior. It's going to come out in a manifestation somewhere else, a risky behavior, you know, uh, you're going to be rude to somebody, you're going to have it's going to manifest in other ways. Physically, you're going to be physically ill, a headache, a stomach ache, whatever. And it's okay to cry. And I think we really need to reintroduce that into the society, and especially our work and the process altogether, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not this society, we need to get back into our emotions. We need to get back and not think that our emotions hinder us. Our emotions um help us to process the world, and we each do that differently. And I think that's the beauty of it. And so much and we're not, if you actually allow yourself to express what you need to, you're not so much up here, you're coming from here, and that heart can be open and you can be able to feel and feel deeply, and to allow yourself to express. And that's one of the things I really encourage. And it's hard because I'm fighting a whole society that's like, boys don't cry. And I mean, even girls, like just young girls, and how, they have the pressure. And I'm just like, nope, come on, get it out. And that's why I was like, and I had to, contact each teacher of each child. And I was like, look, their grandfather passed this time. So if you start seeing any attitude or any changes in them, please let me know, and please be a little sympathetic with them.
That's another thing we don't account for as society is, giving people that room to breathe and to get that emotion out, you know. And they allow I love the jobs that you have 2 days of bereavement time, and it's like, dude, you have no idea. Okay, 2 days, that was my dad, that was my whole lifetime, you
Yeah.
know. And I think because my dad and I had such a close relationship, um because of the issues I have with my mom, but it really opened up that door for me to release that emotion. When I was crying, I think it like opened up a floodgate of stuff that led to the changes in my life that have brought me here. Like Harold was saying, he's like, you've come a long, long way. And I'm like, and that's because of people like you and Harold and all these other people that said, hey, it's okay, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to have that. We have to have a good support system that's there, and a good support system that's like, that can keep us A, centered, and then B, allow us to be ourselves. Because,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, is like, you have to have people that uplift you and support you. Otherwise, guess
Or
what?
just sit there and let you cry. I know like Angela and like I think a couple of other people would just sit, because my husband worked nights all the time. Remember, he was doing all that overtime because he worked in a toilet paper factory.
Oh,
So he was always working during the pandemic. And those nights where I was by myself, and people to just sit there with you. And I think having a doula, like somebody like you, allows the family to feel more. I think it's such a beautiful thing, and I don't know why it's not more widespread.
well, you have to understand that the death process was always skirt. I mean, after the Victorian era and it became more scientific, and, medical advancements and all this jazz, death just kind of like was swept underneath the rug. And it was just, well, eventually one day, you're not have to deal with it. But until then, it was made to be very creepy and um, morbid. And there's honestly nothing more morbid. Like, to be honest, it's a beautiful process of understanding and going, sitting with the body and understanding what the body does at the end of life, how it shuts down, how it's shutting down. You know, it's understanding and allowing it to be a natural part of life.
Yeah.
It's just it's no different than, how they treat the supernatural. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's supposed to be happening. The problem is it's the unknown.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot. I mean, I will tell you, when my dad was passing, he was telling me he was seeing things. He was, things that looked like playing cards, like his vision, like he was like different dimensions. And I was like, oh, interesting. You know what I mean?
Did he
Like
see like past loved ones? You hear that a lot. Like
he did.
people see their loved ones.
Yeah. And and it confirmed to me because he saw my stepmother, his wife that had passed. And I was like, okay, Ellen, when you're ready to take him, let him see you, let me know. And, and I said this all in my head. I didn't say it, to him. And then all of a sudden he was like, Mandy, I see her. And I was like, really? And he goes, well, at first I didn't realize. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. And then he's like, oh, I saw her again, and that was it. He never saw her afterwards, but he had other experiences that, I was like, okay, it's getting close.
Yeah.
You know,
That's how, we always talk about the veil, and it's like that's incredible how you can start to see the signs of that veil starting to just open to
Mhm.
let you in.
Yeah. He kept saying that it looked like wisp, like clouds, like wisp. And I was like, oh, okay, well, getting close. And I would just let him talk. And then he'd shut down and just not want to talk about it. And I was like, okay. And then that's the thing. And I think that's another thing is being okay with being in silence. People don't know how to just hold space. And it's important. It's important to create that space as, even in relationships and day-to-day lives. Like a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it. I've done it where I've gone to my partner and it was like, hey, I need to talk to you. And are they in that state of mind? No. Like take
Yeah.
the time and go, hey, I need to talk to you. Can we find a time where we can sit and talk? And then that way we're fully attentive,
Yeah.
But a lot of the times we're just, because of how society has had, it's just like that constant movement and stimulation. I'm like, well, no wonder why we have like the attention span of an ant. I mean,
Yeah, well, if you talk it, you get brushed off. And especially when it comes to like the deep subjects like this, people don't want to hear it or it makes them uncomfortable. Or it's like, oh, you need to get over, it's been 2 years now, you need to get over that or whatever. I mean, obviously, I don't cry every day, but, you know, sometimes, certain days really hit me hard.
yeah, I mean, and it could be just a simple thing of just, for some reason their picture just stands out and, you know, you see it or you smell them or, you see somebody out on the street that, remind you of that person.
My dad talks to me in music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had to learn that because I was so desperate after he passed to just hear his voice. And I'm like, please talk to me. Please talk to me. And I wasn't I'm not a dreamer. And I remember the first time he came to me in a dream, I was so excited. And then I woke up and I realized it was a dream and I was sad at first. But, I always want to hear him. I just want to hear him. I'm on that constant search. And sometimes I don't know if he's doing it to mess with me. I also find random pennies all over the place. Pennies from Heaven was a song that he liked.
Oh,
Like I would walk by this table, nothing on it, and then the next day, or the next second on the next pass by, there's a penny. It's like, or it's on the floor, or you know what I mean? Pennies from heaven. So I always take them and throw them on the ancestor altar every time I find them. I'm like, message received.
Because this is the thing, is sometimes our grief can get in the way of our, even if we're open, it can get in the way. And sometimes we have a hard time like hearing our loved ones on the other side. It's, that's why, when people are open, and it's because, our grief can get in the way, our emotions can get in the way. And the thing is I had that. Like, at first, when dad first passed, oh man, I was seeing him, I was hearing him, I was great, and then it started fading a little bit. And then all of a sudden I brought him into the house today and it was like, boom, he's back, and it's like, I can see him, I can hear him. And, you know, heck, I even saw him at his service, and it was interesting because how I saw him is exactly how TJ described him and how Shai described him. And I was like, and Shai was like, Mom, Grandpa came to me. I was in the bathroom and looked up and I saw him in the mirror and then he was gone.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, awesome, it was
Why
the
can't I have that experience? I get songs, like and I, although when he did, after the funeral, I remember I was going to get something out of the fridge for my mother, and I just had a breakdown moment. And there was people all over, and all of a sudden I just heard in his voice, clear as day, Joanne, enough now, it's okay. And I turned around and I'm like, and my mother's like, what? I'm like, who said that? She's like, who said what? I'm like, none of you people just said my name and told me, enough now. And they're like, no. And that was him because he'd get so frustrated if I was upset. I think that's because it upset him.
Mhm. It did. Yeah. I mean, my dad, as I was pulling up to pick up his remains, his cremation, his urn, I had Simple Man come on the radio as I was pulling into the lyric, and I was like, "Are you serious, Dad?" And so I'm sitting there bawling my eyes out before I
Yeah.
can even get to, and I was just like, "All right, Dad, I hear you. This is our song. I get it." And there was one other song, Disturbs, Song of Silence.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and these aren't songs that I would associate with my father, but at that moment, at that time, it was like, it was like, okay.
Yeah. And it was like on my ride home, I swear to God, my Spotify was just throwing out every type of song that my dad loved, and I'm driving and crying at the same time. Like it was just, I'm like, this is just crazy. I've never seen my Spotify, and it does it now too. And it'll just randomly throw out like, what's one of his favorite songs? Raindrops keep falling on my head, things like that.
Oh,
Or sometimes it's more lighthearted, but yeah, he'll come through loud and clear. There's certain songs by Perry Como especially.
yeah, yeah. See, my dad was, he loved hard, classic rock, especially Kiss, AC/DC. So there are certain songs that I know were his. Um, but it's just like, so I had a friend, she, after my dad passed, she got me, it was supposed to say, it says the first one that she got, it was a mix up, but it wasn't because I knew exactly why. But it says, daughter always on my mind and forever in my heart. And then it's in memory of my father. I bawled because that showed me he's always here. He's always thinking of me.
Yeah.
It's supposed to say dad.
Oh
Like
wow.
she goes, and she had ordered from this person before, and she's just like, I'm so sorry. That's so wrong. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. And she got it. But it was like, no, this is my dad.
Yeah.
That was his message to me, knowing that I am always right there with him. And vice versa.
And it's funny because it's Frank Sinatra's going on in the background right now, you know.
When my
And
dad was in the hospital, I was playing Frank Sinatra all the time. And so that I laugh. That's why I'm like, see?
they're ganging up on us.
They are. And they do that. Like, they're like, we'll let you know we're around. We'll let you know we're here. And you may not always see us, you may not always hear us, but we're around and we'll let you know. Like every night. And even when he was living here, I had this cardinal start coming to me right um at dusk, and he'll just chirp and we'll talk. Like I'll sit there and I'll go, and he'll just start chirping at me. Like we're talking and having like a birdie conversation. And I'm like, every night he comes and it's like him saying goodnight. And since my dad's paths, he will come even at dusk towards dark time. Cardinals don't do that. And I'm like, okay, good night, Daddy. I
That's
love
wild. My dad, interestingly enough, chose the seagull as his bird of messenger because because our favorite thing to do was the beach. And
Oh,
remember, I did that whole because it was pandemic time, and I did all these treks, and I went to go scream at the ocean.
yeah.
And I went and I had some seafood for him because that was the things he loved the most. And I went and I'm sitting there at this restaurant, and it's on the pier in Portland, Maine, and it's called Luke's, I believe. And I'm sitting there, and there was a window, and there's the harbor, there's the pier or whatever, because the boats come, they directly to the pier to the restaurant.
Mhm.
And you have those pylon things with the ropes around them and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I look, and my friend is like, "What the hell?" And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "There was this bird, this seagull, and I have a picture of him in my pictures, and he's just staring at me the whole time while I was eating, and just staring at me." And I'm like, and it was uncanny. Like he wasn't moving, like people weren't phasing him. Usually they fly away, and he was just sitting right there while I was eating, just looking at me. And I'm like, "Dad, really? Is that you?" I'm like, "Why would you come in?" But my dad always had that sense of humor.
Yep.
We always would do, like, he wanted the funny card for his birthday, not the mushy dad. You know what I mean? That
Yep.
was our thing. And I'm like, "Really? A seagull? Like, come on."
Yep. My dad was the same way. There was always sense of humor. Like he always, my favorite thing about my father is not only could he get me to laugh and be silly, is that he literally could get me out of my way. Like he could
Yeah.
talk to me. He never yelled. He could talk to me and he would go and get me to see the other side of things.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is talent, that is beauty. And I treasured it.
Yeah. And that whole summer, everywhere I went, there was a seagull within 5 feet of me. Like, no lie. And I'm like, "You've got to be," I have pictures. And I'm just like, wow. And at the time, I was like,
That is awesome.
I'm
But
like, "Can't you just say a word? Can't you just come in a dream? Do
mm-mm,
you know what?" And that's my biggest thing. Does he know how much I loved him? And I wish I could have been there. That's my thing. Like, "Do you know, Dad? Do you even know? I'm so sorry." And that's all I keep saying. And that's my guilt, I know, but
and this is a message coming through for you. And all I hear is I had to do this journey on my own. And I feel like for him, it was personal. It was nothing to deal with you. And honestly, it gave him exactly the way that he wanted because he didn't want you to see him like that. He didn't want you to remember the sickness. He wanted you to remember the good. And that's the hard part sometimes.
yeah, it's hard because, like I said, my sister would be like, she's like, "You got the best years of his life," and da 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 da. And I'm like, I would have to And, and I'm like, listen, I would have given anything to be there right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to understand, and I feel bad because my dad did not want anybody there but me. Like, it was just me and him against the world. Okay. And basically the whole process. And my youngest sister didn't get to see him. And I was just like, are you sure you don't want anybody like coming in? You don't want me to tell, my uncle, his brothers, his sister, like nothing? And he's just like, no. And I'm like, okay. And I knew that I would probably look like the bad guy. I knew it. And it's just like, and finally I got him right before he passed to let everybody, it was like, I finally got him to say, okay. And it wasn't easy.
Yeah. And it's not, and my sister was like, you got the best of him. And, I get this part of him. And I'm like saying to myself, I would have given anything to be in that position
Yeah.
that you're in. And I think, that was true about my dad. I don't think he would have wanted me to see him that way. I just wish I could have. I just hope he knows I love him so much.
Joanne, he does. You need to let go. And maybe this session is to help you heal. To know that you did everything. Your dad loves you. And to know that, you know, you it's okay. And he's with you now. You may not be able to hear him. You may not be able to be like it was, but he's still around. And he'll give you signs and he'll let you know. Trust me. That's the thing is I got to be where I was at because my dad knew I knew what I was doing. He knew
Yeah.
I could handle. Again, my dad could be extremely stubborn. So that I had to fight with him. There were times I had to just stand my ground. My sister couldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I think I protected my sister from a lot, you know? So, I mean, and again, I had the responsibility of everything. So afterwards, I was doing the funeral, I was closing his, accounts and paying off things. And, you know, I was having to deal with all of that. So, I'm like, in many ways, I had to carry the burden for a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and where do you go now for that healing that you give to others?
Yeah. For me, I find it in close friends. I was very lucky during this process. I found other people that were going through a very similar process and that they were or had gone through that process. And I leaned on them and I leaned on, like my children and just and when I say lean on my children, it's not like I'm divulging like my
I
feelings,
know.
but I'm leaning on them for joy. I'm leaning on them for good memories and to help me kind of pep me up.
Yeah.
Also, making sure I go to the gym, like, or at least doing yoga. Like that was the thing is
Yeah.
I was going to the gym every day before my dad came and lived with me. And I've struggled since then. I'm not gonna lie. But because of everything that's happened with my dad, it makes me want to take care of myself better. And
Yeah.
I do realize I have to make myself a priority.
Yeah. The self-care aspect is definitely an important thing. And another reason why I think, having somebody like you in that process, I don't know, you just amaze me, and I wish we had somebody like that, especially during the pandemic. I think it would have been so much helpful, with so many, because it was unexpected yet expected, because he made the active decision, you know.
Yeah.
So at what stage does one's life does one decide or call on a death doula? Is it something that when you're in the hospital and like, how does it?
Normally, it's like, okay, you either have a terminal illness, and then we start going through the stages then. And at the beginning, if you're a terminal illness, then, it's very light, or sometimes it could be intense because, things happen and you don't, like, maybe you don't have everything prepared. Do you have all the paperwork, and it's helping with the resources. And I did this, and then if it's unexpected, it is usually when you're in the hospital and you're going, okay. And then sometimes it's afterwards. Like sometimes I get people coming to me to get a reading, and I'm adding some of this care service into um into a session and into like them coming back and then having to do like I have mending hearts oil and candle, and it's to help with grieving of all kinds. Like it's helped to mend the heart and to bring back joy and to bring back that, and then I'll usually go, okay, so you have that, and now we're going to do love thyself, and we're going to do this to build up self-love. Because a lot of the times when and I've had to do this. Heck, I've been slathering myself with, like female empowerment to help empower myself during this time because, you have to be willing to take care of yourself. You have to, and sometimes, and what people don't realize is sometimes even, working out is that the stress that my body needs right now.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need rest. Maybe I need to write. Maybe I need to sing. Maybe I need to, whatever your passions are or whatever outlet, what is that self-care? What does that look like? And if I need movement, maybe I need to dance. Maybe I need to do
Yeah.
some belly dancing. Maybe I need to, do yoga instead or walk, do something that is,
Yeah.
getting you.
For me, it was road trips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love traveling. Like I'm actually getting ready to go out of town soon. So I need it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need a break. I was like, I just need me time.
Yeah.
So
I understand. I went through that the last couple of weeks. I'm like, I have been, and I'm learning, and I'm learning from you. I have been taking the time to say, no, I need to do this, and not worry so much about everybody else around me and their needs, but what does Joanne need? And Joanne needs to get out in nature again and reconnect
yes.
and get off I mean, I have to be on social media, obviously, to a certain degree. But I will say that my mindset has been tremendously better since I limit it to that morning access, where I do a session in the morning with a group of girls in Breezeburg on Instagram. We do a morning coffee meetup to start the day, and we pull a card, and it's just very empowering.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I've been really upping my game on, as far, like I said, the last 3 years. It was a lot of work.
I've
I think it
actually,
helps us confront our shadow.
it does. It does. Like I've actually been trying to break up with getting on social media, like on my phone at all before I do what I need to do for the day. Like I've really been trying to work on it, especially the past couple. And I'm not perfect, like I'm breaking habits. So, you know, it's learning to be gentle with yourself in this process. And I think that's what death kind of does. It brings in that humility and teaches us to have compassion, not just for others, but this is also, and I will kind of turn this around, um, with caregivers in general. It's hard. We're taught, especially as women, we're taught to take care of everybody else other than us, to look outside of us and this is a society thing. This is not, and it's become cultural where women, we're the nurturers, we're this, we're that, we're that. The thing is we have to take care of ourselves. And if we don't, um, that's where the imbalances come in. And that's where, the most powerful um things that we can do is to um say no when we need to say, I have to take this time for me, you know, and it's allowing to hold that space and respect that space. So, yeah. And I'm proud of you because I know what you've been doing isn't, it's not easy for you.
I'm proud of you because I wish I could have, you just handled it so gracefully. I was a mess, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, like, I don't know. I think it opened up a lot inside of me that had to come out
Mhm.
because I too think I was brought up that in a household where my mother was like, emotions are a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Everything has to look right on the outside.
Yep. I was raised the same way. And I was always that emotional child that did not know when to shut their mouths, and I did not know when to stop. And, I see that in my son, and at the same time, I'm just like, yeah, it drives me nuts, but at the same time, I'm like, that's me. That and so I learned to go, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's just I need to learn boundaries.
Yeah.
And my family just didn't know how to. It was just I was taught to be seen and not heard
Hmm.
early. And that was the hard part. And I always wanted to be heard. So it taught me, it made me feel, and this is something that I've had to work on, that what I say matters. What I'm meant to, it's okay for me to express. It's not a bad thing. You
Yeah.
know, trust me. I mean, I was taught to ladies are supposed to do this prim and proper, this and that, and that was not me.
Yeah.
I was not that. And I had to
Yeah.
really embrace myself and know that I was exactly who I was supposed to be.
Yeah. I was always taught that, we're taught that there's definitely something wrong with you if you're this way, because I was the rebel as well. I'm like,
Yes.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to get married. I don't want to just sit here and cook. I want to travel, like I want to do these things.
Yeah.
And, and in my house, it was like, you don't let the outside, the boundary was the house. You know, everything happened in the house, but nothing could go past the house. You know what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the boundary. The outside world, don't let them in. Whatever happens behind here, you want to cry, go cry in your room, but don't go cry.
Yes. So I've had to watch myself because my room was my safe area.
Yeah.
So when I start getting overwhelmed or when I start like needing that time or needing to feel safe, or even sometimes where I'm working on something, I don't want to be disturbed, even though I have an office, I'd go to the bedroom. And,
Yeah, me too.
but it's because that's been my solace. Like that's been my safe zone since I was a child.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. It's kinda like, and it's very similar to the womb. So, you have your seclusion and you're being taught, like, we got programmed to be trained, "Hey, I'm gonna go here."
Yeah.
So, a lot of the times, it's really easy to isolate.
Oh, yeah. Especially now with technology and all the great little funky things we have that can keep us in that cocoon. Now we have mini fridges we can put in there. We don't even have to come out of that room.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's like, and then, the pandemic, it's like, I don't know. I feel like I lost all concept of time.
Mhm, mhm. And that's another thing, is, like, nobody really talks about the little deaths or even some of the major deaths that we go through that aren't physical. Like, we have deaths all the time, but we don't take the time to acknowledge them. We don't take the time. Like, I'll tell you, coming and being initiated, if you're initiated, you're not the same person that you are before you get initiated and after you get initiated. And if you can't acknowledge that that person before has died, that that messes with you.
It does.
And I had to learn that the hard way, and I didn't know how to express it. And I feel like right now, with everything, I'm starting to find me again,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's like taking those steps and acknowledging we have to start talking about death more. We need to start talking about that death isn't this ugly, nasty thing in the room. It's this beautiful process that we do have to slow down sometimes to do. At least, I tell people, even if you have to do like 5 minutes, 5 minutes of just you time to just decompress, do it.
And that's what I tell people. Meditation and in time to ground and center doesn't have to be this, we always think it has to be this big ta-da, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. I nailed it down. I did the 20 seconds of Zen videos. Everybody has 20 seconds to just pull back and
Reground. And all it takes is really focusing on breath.
mhm.
Focus. It's so simple. Like I show people, I'm like, how do you feel? After 3 breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I'm like, how do you feel? And they're like, I feel better. I feel grounded. I feel more centered. That's what you need.
Yeah. We need to reconnect with what matters because in this society, I mean, now they're talking about bumping the retirement age up more. Like, how much more can we possibly go? Like, seriously, I swear I'm going to be that generation that I have to work till I'm 90 before I can retire. But we're taught that this is the pace of life. That this is, we have. Where are we going to take this stuff? What we should be focusing on is each other.
Yeah.
How you're feeling through the process, how Hercules feels, how I feel, how Jim feels. How do we feel? And stop focusing on everything else is just everything else.
Yeah. It's realigning and going, we need connection. We need that. We don't need to be separated. We need more connection. We
Unity.
need, yes, we need that unity. We need that connection. We need that. We're humans. We're meant to be touched. We're meant to be listened to and understood and have that, and it's not a negative thing. Like and it doesn't have to be long stints, but it's allowing that connection. We are built on connection. We're all energy. We're all connected. And if we get separated, that's when things really start getting jumbled. That's when things start getting disconnected.
And that's so true. And we're so disconnecting to what's important. We're connecting to these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're missing something. I remember when the movie Wall-E first came out when my daughter was born. And I'm like, why is this? To me, it was everybody's like, oh, what a great movie. And I'm like,
Mm-mm.
that's a message right there. That's where we're headed.
Yeah. And that is in a way where we're headed. And I'm just like, like I was commenting on somebody's page and she was like, would you say something um if your order got messed up, like your coffee?
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely. And she was like, well, you're braver than me. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And then somebody went off on me going, they don't get paid very much. You should just make your own coffee and just stay at home. And I was like, first of all, I do make my own coffee. Second of all, I make my own creamer. Okay, if that tells you anything. Second of all, I go, if I want to spurge and have go buy with my money a coffee, I expect that coffee to be good. I expect it to be correct. That's just out of respect for myself, and that's out of respect
Yeah.
of the money that I'm spending, because money is energy. See, and a lot of people, it's just how do you look at things?
Yeah.
All
Well, I
about
think it was Dr. Jeremy and I were talking about a similar thing, like you're talking about with the lady and the coffee. And it's like I feel like as a society, we're paying more and giving more and getting less in return.
yeah.
What happened to taking pride in making your work, in your work? If you're making coffee for a living, then you should be making good coffee. And if you don't feel like it, then maybe you shouldn't be doing that, or maybe calling sick. And I know that sounds harsh, but
Mhm. We have to start getting reconnected with our emotions and our feelings, and not feeling and hold ourselves accountable.
mhm. And it's so true. We don't put the accountability where it needs to be anymore. And we're so worried about hurting somebody's feelings. And here's the thing: not everything feels good all the time. That's how you learn what's good and what's bad, right? You touch a hot stove, it burns you, and that's how you know. Don't touch it. So when you're doing something wrong, the consequence is, I'm not saying you got to be beaten but you need a consequence, and the consequence of your action. So you learn not to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's learning that we're not entitled to anything. Like we're just not.
It's
And
not making a person anything. If anything, it's making a person stronger to be accountable. It's making them a stronger person. You're not shattering their world because you're correcting them in school as a teacher or wherever. If you're correcting somebody's behavior, it doesn't make you, you're not shattering anybody's world.
exactly.
There's nothing wrong with pulling aside to somebody and saying, hey, that's not appropriate right now, you know?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm plugging in my computer real quick. No, you're completely right. And that's where I think we have to get back into the self, but also not just the self. That's where the self-care comes in, but connecting with one another and understanding we are connected. We are, that is. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's also some of the work that maybe, I'm here to do, you're here to do, when we are ones that are on the spiritual path and on a true spiritual path, not of ego, but it's, you know, allowing. And the thing is I say that, but I'm like, we all have the ego, and the ego's there to keep us safe. But it's understanding, are we coming from fear? Or are we coming from love? Are we coming from a willingness to understand and to have compassion?
My friend Wayne says, creator spirit speaks from the heart. Ego and fear speak from the head.
Yes. Yes.
And we need to learn to speak with the heart again. So many of us are speaking out in fear. And, I work with at-risk youth, and I'm dealing with kids that live off of snacks. They don't know how to do basic functionalities like we did. And, when we were that age at 20, 21, they're like perpetual kind of children. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but they just, at 20 years old, I didn't need my mother telling me certain things. You know what I mean? Like I knew, and I just feel for these kids.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm actually determined to teach mine, responsibilities, and I'm teaching them how to cook and clean and
I was gonna say they
do.
better know how to cook in your house. The food, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is like they have to learn. I was like, I am not, you're gonna have to be accountable for yourself. And they find out when they're not accountable for who they are, and they go, oh. I go, is that my fault or your fault? We'll have these discussions. Do they like it? No, nobody does. But that's the thing. We have to. And that's, I think, where we all have to bringing it back around death is understanding that we all at one point will be leaving this earth. We cannot escape death. I cannot. And at this point, it's like, when do we hold ourselves accountable for everything that we do? And if we're not living the life that we want, when are you going to? Because we're not promised tomorrow. Every morning is a blessing. Every breath is a blessing. And it can be taken away in seconds. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm like, I feel like we've been in a zone here. I don't even realize how long we've been on. If people want to work with you and get a hold of you, what are the best ways to get a hold of you? Like, do you do the, especially for the doula, is that through Three Crows Conjure? Is that a separate thing?
It is through Three Crows Conjure, but I usually tell people to email me at threecrowsconjure oh, threecrowsconjure@gmail.com or at info@threecrowsconjure.com. So those are the two places. Those are where I can have a personal conversation. I can walk you through. I can tell you a little bit about me. So, and to see if I'm the right fit.
Any final message for anybody out there who's going through a tough grief process right now? If you could tell them one thing.
Mm. The first thing I want to say is this too shall pass, that each day it will get better, and to focus on the good, to focus on what made you happy, with that person. If you are grieving, you know, allow yourself to find something that is symbolic, and you can take that with you and know that you have a piece of them with you. You know, that's why, they do have the little urn necklaces where you can carry the ashes if you want to. Most people are weirded out by it, but I'm like, have a stone. They're never far away. Your loved ones are always there. You just got to be open to hear it.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for this amazing talk tonight. You're so beautiful, and I'm so blessed to have found you. When Kirk brought us together, that's the biggest gift he could have left me with. Thank you.
Thank you, love. Thank you.
And thank you both for an excellent, deep, and very illuminating program. I look forward
Thank
to
you.
conversations with each other.
Yes. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.